The alarms weren't broken, they were cut. 40 mercenary guns closed around a valley, 36 seals pinned, mortars locked. On the ridge above stood only Maeve Archer, dismissed as a weather tech with a toolbox. When the SEAL commander whispered, "This is how we die," a single rifle shot split the mountain and rewrote the battle. Maeve wasn't just a worker, she was a sniper the world had forgotten, and what followed became one of the wildest rescues the SEALs would never stop swearing by. How did a bag of repair gear become a sniper's nest? Why did the enemy sniper match her breathing? And what hidden network was waiting for her trigger pull? You're about to hear it all, but first, hit subscribe and ring the bell for A Simple Woman, because these are the stories they'll never print in history books, and you won't want to miss the next one. The alarms weren't broken, they were cut. 40 mercenary guns closed around a granite bowl where 36 Navy SEALs tried to make themselves thinner than the rocks. Mortars had already walked fire halfway to their boots. On the ridgeline above them, hidden in wind and glare, a weather technician with a dented toolbox zipped her parka, tightened a faded ball cap, and listened to a radio no one remembered was still alive. When the SEAL commander whispered, "This is how we die," a single rifle report sliced the mountain and turned every head that could still turn. Maeve Archer was supposed to count gusts and grease bearings, to log the tantrums of the Alpine weather and send them downrange in tidy packets. She woke before the sun, swept frost from the anemometers with the back of a glove, and bled air from the fuel line of a generator that coughed like an old smoker. Her shack clung to the spine of the mountain like a barnacle, 20 meters from a repeater mast that sang in every wind. She knew the pitches of those songs better than she knew the faces at the base. E-flat for a northerly, a restless B for the storm track, the hollow moan that warned ice was feathering the guy wires. The work was quiet, necessary, safe. The way back down was a cable road and a habit of not remembering other lives. The morning it broke, the mountain was clean and sharp, the air too clear to trust. The instruments showed a high-pressure snap that made sound travel like wire. Maeve logged the numbers, poured coffee into a dented thermos with a chipped blue rim, and stepped out to check rime on the sensors. Below, to the southeast, a column of dust frayed into the light like smoke from a bad secret. She lifted a battered pair of binos. 3 black dots moved along a scree shelf where there should have been none. The dots grew tails, trails of men, too many, too coordinated, slipping into dead ground that fed the bowl. Her radio cracked, not on the channel she was supposed to monitor, but on one she had repaired months ago out of boredom and stubbornness. The voice came sifted through static, the cadence of someone who had spent his life not wasting syllables. Havoc 1 for any air at all. Danger close, grid 9x3. Maeve set the binos on the rail and turned the gain with her thumb. A second voice cut in, clipped, brittle with control. Negative on air, say again, negative, radar degraded, stand by for... The rest fell into snow. She went inside, stood in the doorway a breath too long, then flicked on the auxiliary receiver she'd built from a dead emergency beacon, a stolen preamp, and faith. The repeater mast hummed. The shack's tin roof pinged with thermal contraction. The radio passed her, the kind of silence that means somebody somewhere is lying. Sirens should have been rising from the base below, a keening thread that stitched the valley to the mountain. They did not. The line that fed the warning net was as blank as unmixed concrete. Maeve felt the old cold move through her, deeper than the Alpine chill, older than weather, and pressed the heel of a hand to the scar at the base of her thumb, where recoil had once split the skin. She forced herself back into the rhythm of the day. Record, check, tighten, breathe. But when she stepped out again with a wrench between her teeth and a harness over her shoulder, the bowl was blooming with muzzle flashes like foxfire in rot. The dust column had stilled, the mercenary ring had closed. A gust shoved at the mast hard enough to make it complain. She clipped in, climbed 3 rungs, stopped. Below, men were trying not to die loudly, firing in short bursts, counting to 3 before moving half a body length. Someone's mic stayed hot long enough to catch a laugh that wasn't a laugh, and then the brittle sentence that bent her bones, "This is how we die?" It wasn't fear, it was inventory, the kind you do when you've already paid everything and the ledger is still red. She was back on the platform before she made the decision she had already made. The toolbox thumped the floor, the wrench clanged the wall. She pulled the false bottom out of the tool chest and laid it on the bench she had built from a shipping pallet and a superstition. Wrapped in an oil-dark cloth were things that didn't belong to the weather. A bolt, a receiver, a barrel in canvas, a scope whose turrets still carried the shallow half-moons her thumbnail had carved when she needed to feel edges. Her palm hovered and trembled and steadied. She hadn't touched these pieces in years. She had taken apart more than rifles to keep from putting this one back together. She unfolded the cloth anyway. Outside, someone walked a mortar 2 rounds closer. The repeater's guy wire quivered like a live thing. Maeve laid the receiver in the vise, shouldered the bolt home until it kissed metal with the right sound, torqued the barrel to a number she did not look at, because her hands already knew it. She set the trigger, dry-fired once, and felt the break. A glass rod snapping without drama. She mounted the scope and set a rough 0 by eye on the notch she had cut in the mast 3 winters ago, for no reason she had admitted. The rifle lay on the bench, finished and bare and somehow inevitable. She took a breath and the breath did not stick. The ghost that sometimes waited, the buckskin thin kid with the too big rifle in a place that smelled like cordite and rot, stayed where she had left him, behind a door that could be locked from her side. In the old life she had learned to stack seconds into something you could stand on. She stacked these, safety sling data book that was mostly the mountain, a roll-up mat she used to sleep on when storms made the shack keener than she liked. She slung the rifle and the weight settled her spine. The first step outside felt like fraud. The second was work. By the third, the wind laid a hand on her cheek and told her what it always told her, "I am the only truth that doesn't care who listens." She moved to a snow-scoured ledge she had cleared the winter the mast iced up so badly she'd had to hack it free with a borrowed axe. From there she could see the bowl without being seen, a cheat the mountain gave only to people who had learned its grammar. She unrolled the mat, used the toolbox as a rear bag, and let the rifle's bipod bite into wood that had been part of a crate that had been part of a plan to never do this again. The mercenary ring had shape now, not just noise. Machine guns nested where the scree made a false bench, mortars hid in the shadow of a broken slide, a spotter's glass winked on a spur like a cat's eye in dusk. In the center, the SEALs had found the only shallow crease the geology offered and were pouring their courage into it to make it larger. She dialed the scope, not for numbers, but for the wind's sentence. The push across the bowl, the lift near the far wall, the dead air in the lee of a boulder nobody would ever forgive for being there. The reticle settled. Her finger found the trigger, and then the slack, and then the place beyond slack. She took the breath the mountain allowed and let it go when the crosshairs stopped moving. The shot cracked the ridge. For a half second, every sound paused to listen to it. A machine gunner believed in something and then believed in sleep. Gravel danced on the scree. Down in the crease, 3 helmets lifted like prairie dogs before instinct shoved them low again. Radios lit, enemy and friendly, and the valley's geometry changed by the thickness of one bullet. Maeve ran the bolt without looking at it. The mountain's truths did not change. The alarm net below stayed dead. The men in the bowl were still outnumbered, but the silence that had felt like a verdict now felt like a choice. She took another breath, tasted metal and coffee, and the old life coming back like circulation into a numb hand, and lined up the next lie the enemy had told themselves. The radio hissed, then snapped into words carried on static. Any station. This is Ramsey, Havoc 1. We are black on support. Repeat, air denied, no extract. Casualties mounting. If anyone hears this, the voice cut, broken by interference. Maeve hunched over the receiver, thumb twisting gain and squelch until she caught half a syllable more. Surrounded, grid 9-3. Then only snow, the hollow hum of a frequency strangled. She set the handset down slow, as if dropping it fast might shatter the last link. Her shack's single bulb swayed on its cord, a pendulum of silence. Then another voice pulsed across a sideband she hadn't tuned in months. Lighter, clipped, female. "Maeve Archer, if you're still on that mountain, I hope you kept your toys. I pulled the log before they cut my terminal. It's not a fault." The alarms were deliberately silenced. Captain Layla Shah, Intel, Alpine base. A woman who, last time Maeve saw her, had leaned on a table stacked with maps and asked too many questions about weather patterns. Now her tone was stripped of formality. Credentials used to shut down the net belonged to a phantom account. No owner, no paper trail. They buried the key in maintenance schedules, Maeve. It looks like Victor Darrow's hand. Darrow. Maeve closed her eyes. Colonel on contract, soldier of another kind of war. She'd heard rumors in the mess, PMC headhunters, men who preached chaos as currency. And if Darrow had orchestrated this, it wasn't an ambush by chance. It was bait, a funnel carved out of terrain and arrogance. Static swallowed Shah for a moment, then spat her voice back. "They're forcing the SEALs into a kill bowl, mortars bracketed, ridgelines mined. When they break for the false exit Darrow's leaving open, the whole floor will blow. If you can move, move, because no one else will." Maeve looked around her shack. The walls leaned inward, hung with wrenches, coils of rope, the banal skeleton of a maintenance tech's life. On the bench lay the rifle, newly assembled, scope glass still catching the mountain light. She pressed her palms against the wood, felt splinters, felt her breath. Her mind slid back to a night years ago, another voice crackling in her headset, a target too small in her scope. She'd fired then, and the image had followed her into every dawn. That was why she'd run to this mountain, why she'd folded herself into weather reports and silence, to bury that shot, to forget the name others had whispered, sniper. But Ramsey's voice wouldn't stop replaying. Black on support, casualties mounting. If anyone hears this. A hand found the sling. She tightened it across her shoulder, felt the rifle's weight change her spine. She pulled a battered rucksack from beneath the cot and filled it without thinking. Water, spare mags wrapped in oilcloth, the small medkit she used for cuts on her own hands. She hesitated, then tucked the thermos inside too, still half full of coffee. Outside, the wind had shifted, a cutting northwesterly that made the mast hum in a warning key. Down in the bowl, smoke curled higher. Through her binos she saw flashes, enemy teams adjusting mortars, painting arcs, herding the SEALs like sheep toward the gap Darrow wanted them to take. It was a textbook kill funnel, as clean and merciless as anything she had studied in training. Her finger brushed the scar at her thumb again. She whispered into the cold, the same phrase she had spoken over the rifle barrel minutes before. Not this time. Maeve locked her shack's door out of habit, though she knew wood and tin wouldn't keep anyone out. She cinched her hood, slid goggles down, and started along the ridge path that only goats and stubborn people used. Her boots crunched frost. The rifle rode across her back. Below, a valley waited to collapse on men who had already given everything. Above, the mountain offered her a vantage and a choice. She took the first step deeper into it, leaving the weather tech behind. Maeve moved along the ridgeline, boots finding holds she'd mapped over years of weather checks, her breath low and steady. Below, the valley was tightening like a noose. The mercenary perimeter had grown teeth, tripods sprouting, smoke shells stacked. Darrow's design was working. If the SEALs broke toward the false gap, the mines would chain react and finish the story. She dropped flat as a shadow passed overhead. A drone, small but armed with a gimbal eye that searched for heat. Its hum was insectile, a nervous tremor against the silence of snow. Maeve slid backward into a cleft, unslung her ruck, and pulled free a bundle she had meant for another life, an emergency thermal blanket. She snapped it over herself, crumpled, and waited as the drone lingered. Breath fog wanted to betray her. She pressed her mouth against her sleeve, exhaling into cloth until the machine's whine drifted away. She crawled out, replaced the blanket with a decoy she improvised from a foil poncho and a snow-filled tarp. She jammed a heating pack inside, slapped it with her palm until it hissed hot, then left it propped on a boulder. 10 meters down the trail, the drone banked back, caught the flare, and fired a lazy burst. Snow hissed and steamed. Maeve kept crawling, silent. Her radio cracked alive again, not the baseband, but a narrow frequency, someone's private channel. The voice was low, accented, female. Maeve Archer, the mountain breathes with you. I can hear it. She froze. She hadn't given her name. The voice continued, calm and almost intimate. You still count 4 beats before you let the trigger break. I remember. You taught me. Memory pricked like glass. Years ago, a training range in Eastern Europe, a coalition course. She had instructed a younger sniper from a foreign unit, a woman with hair tied severe and eyes that never blinked at recoil. Sable Kirov. A ghost from the past, now speaking through the snow. Maeve pressed the transmit button but said nothing. Static filled the gap. Then Sable's voice again, softer. Darrow pays me to find you. But I don't need pay to know you're breathing. The channel cut, leaving only the hiss of wind. Maeve's throat tightened. She hadn't thought of Sable in years, not since the girl had vanished from reports, resigned under a veil that usually meant recruited elsewhere. Now she was on the other side of the scope. Ramsey's voice broke in on the command net, ragged, taking fire from 360. Ammo nearly black, medics down, we can't hold the crease much longer. His breath hitched, caught between orders and despair. This is how we die? The words snapped Maeve back. She pressed belly to snow, dragged her rifle forward and lined her scope down slope. Through glass she caught flashes, SEAL helmets ducking, rounds sparking off stone, bodies pressed flat. The mercs shifted, closing tighter, their arcs funneling men toward death, and somewhere beyond, a counter-sniper she once taught was listening for the cadence of her lungs. She slowed them, forced her chest to follow the rhythm of the mountain wind. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. The reticle steadied on a machine gun crew pivoting their barrel down slope. She let the breath go, the shot broke, echoing like stone cracking. The gunner folded, the barrel dropped. Maeve rolled instantly, changing position, because she knew Sable would be searching. A second later, a round chewed bark where her head had been, sharp and perfect. Sable had her range. Maeve's heart kicked hard, tried to climb her throat. She swallowed it down, whispered again into cold air, not this time. She crawled higher, into shadow, and chambered another round. Maeve shifted her scope along the slope, searching for why the mercenaries weren't pressing harder. Their arcs looked too clean, too rehearsed. Then she saw it. Thin rods half buried in scree, wires running between them like veins. Her breath caught. A lattice of seismic mines, the kind that waited for vibration and pressure before cascading. They'd seeded the entire outer arc of the bowl. When Ramsey's men broke for that gap, the whole net would erupt, collapsing stone and bodies together. She keyed her radio, tight beamed to the SEAL net. Ramsey, don't push east, it's mine, do you hear me? It's a false door. Only static came back, the kind that meant jamming, not silence. Darrow had killed the frequencies inside the bowl. Her warning had gone nowhere. She shifted again, spotted a merc officer kneeling by a junction box, hand resting on a detonator that linked back to the grid. He was calm, smoking, waiting for the slaughter. Maeve exhaled, lined the reticle, and squeezed. A flash split the air near her head. Pain seared across her forearm, white-hot, the rifle skidding sideways, the world tipped. She rolled hard, clutching her arm, blood slicking her glove. She gasped and the sound betrayed her. Another round, chipped stone inches away. Sable. The counter-sniper had her zero. Maeve dragged herself behind a boulder, panting. Her right hand throbbed, the trigger finger shaking like it didn't belong to her. She pressed a dressing from her pack against the wound, hissed as the blood seeped through. The memory came unbidden. The boy in Syria, the accidental shot, his eyes wide with shock. For a heartbeat she was back there, rifle slipping, control gone. The radio crackled, unexpected. Maeve? This is Shah. I've got you on the ridge array. Say something if you're still breathing. Maeve swallowed, keyed the mic. Still here. Her voice sounded like gravel. Shah exhaled audibly. Listen. Darrow hijacked the alarms, but he doesn't know the ridge array is more than weather. You wired those sensors into acoustic feeds, didn't you? Anemometers, seismic posts, repeater mics. I can give you the whole grid. Maeve blinked, adrenaline clearing just enough. She remembered the winter she'd been bored, how she'd cross-wired sensors to chart echoes, to teach herself how the mountains sang. She had built a second set of ears without telling anyone. Shah's voice steadied. I'm transferring access now. Use it. Let the mountain aim for you. On her display, a crude overlay lit up. Gust readings, seismic pulses, acoustic triangulation. The valley became a map of moving breath. Maeve cradled her rifle, forcing her wounded hand back onto the grip. The fingers still trembled, but now the data steadied the reticle. She didn't need perfect flesh. She had the mountain. Sable's shot had rattled her. The pain screamed for her to quit. But in the background, Ramsey's voice bled through faintly, distorted but clear enough, running out, "This is how we die." Maeve shut her eyes once, then opened them with a razor calm. "Not today," she whispered. She set her cheek against the stock, pain be damned, and pulled the mountain's song into her scope. Maeve lay flat on the cold stone, her wounded hand trembling against the rifle's grip. The ridge array data flickered across her receiver like a second heartbeat. Gust speeds, microseismic tremors, echoes bouncing from cliff walls. She forced herself to merge them into instinct, to let the mountain breathe with her. Every time her finger shook, the wind vectors steadied it. She swept her scope across the bowl. The mercenary perimeter was tightening, choke points layered with mortars and overlapping arcs. Darrow's plan was elegant. Herd, detonate, erase. But elegance meant predictability. Maeve began marking pressure nodes where the mines connected, spots where a single shot could snap the lattice open harmlessly. The radio cracked alive on the private channel again, soft and taunting. "You always told me to feel the mountain's pulse," Sable Kirov's voice whispered. "You still exhale on 4. I can hear you." Maeve's jaw clenched. She keyed the mic without shifting her scope. "Sable, you don't need to do this." A faint laugh. "You think I have choice? Darrow owns the contracts, owns my debt. But hearing you here in this wind, maybe this is what I was made for. To find you again." Maeve forced her breathing slower, denying Sable the rhythm. "Then find me," she said, and fired. The round split the junction box by the mines. Sparks coughed, wires snapping loose. A ripple of explosions ran outward. Not the catastrophic chain Darrow wanted, but a scattering of localized pops that collapsed stone harmlessly into empty ground. In the crease below, SEAL helmets lifted at the sudden silence. For the first time all day, they had not been driven backward. Maeve cycled the bolt, chambered another round, and shifted to a mortar crew on the far ridge. The ridge array fed her their position through echo triangulation. She adjusted for wind, exhaled, and fired. The tube toppled, 2 mercs scrambling as dust plumed. The radio whispered again, "You're clever, Maeve, but I still hear you. You always hesitate after the shot." A bullet snapped past her cheek, chewing into stone. Maeve rolled instantly, shifted 10 meters downslope and reset. Pain lanced through her injured arm, but she forced the trigger hand still. The mountains steadied her. She pressed the mic. "You learned my breath. Did you learn why I left?" Silence, then Sable's voice, quieter. "They said you shot a boy, that you broke." Maeve swallowed hard, eyes locked on her scope. "I learned the cost. That's why I won't waste another round." She fired again. This time her bullet cut a relay antenna the mercs had hidden, blinding their drone control. The little machines wavered, lost guidance, and crashed into scree. Below, Ramsey's voice cut through the static, urgent. "Whoever you are, keep going. We've got 30 seconds of space. Moving now." Maeve shifted again, the ridge array feeding her the merc's scramble. She dropped another shot, clipping the axle of a gun truck that blocked the only real exit. Smoke belched as the vehicle sagged, its crew abandoning position. Sable's round whined close, forcing Maeve to duck. The counter-sniper's frustration was showing. Maeve gritted her teeth, lined up another target, an ammo crate stacked too close to a heavy gun nest. She fired. The crate went up, shattering the nest in flame. Ramsay's men surged through the opening, dragging wounded, firing bursts to cover. The kill funnel was unraveling. Maeve keyed her mic once more, voice steel. "You hear that, Sable? That's the sound of men living." For the first time, no answer came. Only the mountain's wind and the sound of boots pounding toward escape. Maeve cycled the bolt, breath steady now, and whispered, "Not this time." Maeve flattened against the stone, her pulse steady now, though her wounded arm throbbed with each beat. The ridge array pulsed data across her receiver, sketching the valley like a living grid, gust vectors, echo points, seismic tremors. The seals were moving, dragging their wounded toward the only sliver of space she'd opened. But Darrow hadn't spent months on this trap to lose it in minutes. Her scope swept, and there he was, Colonel Victor Darrow, leaning against the armored cab of his command truck, a smug silhouette with a control box clutched in his gloved hand. Even from here, Maeve recognized the type, a dead man switch wired into the mine lattice, a backup trigger in case the automated net failed. His thumb rested on it casually, a man who thought he had time to finish his coffee before slaughter. Maeve exhaled, dialed windage, and let the mountain's hum guide her. The reticle drifted over his hand, her finger curled, trembling from pain but steadied by the rhythm she had drilled a lifetime ago. She squeezed. The round struck the control box dead center. Sparks erupted. Darrow's hand jerked back as the device shattered, fragments spraying. His shout carried even across the distance, angry, disbelieving. The mine net stayed silent. "Shot one," Maeve whispered. But the mercenaries were still closing, mortars barking, tracer arcs weaving the bowl into a cage. The seals couldn't run the gauntlet without cover. Maeve swung her scope toward a cache she'd marked earlier, a truck stacked with smoke grenades, parked careless near the ridge. She adjusted, caught the angle through thin fog and fired. The second round punched into the crates. A heartbeat later, smoke geysered upward, thick grey curling into the valley, carried by the northwesterly gusts. The battlefield blurred, mercenaries cursing as their arcs dissolved. Shot two. Ramsay's voice broke in over static, urgent. "Cover's good, we're moving, keep the window open." Maeve's scope climbed higher, to the overhang she'd measured days ago while clearing ice from the mast. A shelf of rock barely held by frost and friction, a precarious slab that had threatened collapse for seasons. Now it was the mountain's loaded gun. She dialed elevation, aligned with the stress seam, and squeezed. The shot cracked the anchor. For a breath, nothing. Then the overhang shuddered, tore loose and thundered down. A controlled avalanche, a curtain of stone and snow sweeping the slope. Mercenaries scattered, swallowed in the roar. The slide carved a new channel down the bowl's flank, rough but navigable. Shot three. The valley erupted. Smoke, snow and chaos. The seals seized the moment, Ramsay at their head, hauling wounded through the breach. Maeve's chest unclenched. She'd done it. But the mountain went silent again, predator still, a glint in her peripheral. She rolled just as a round snapped past her ear, gouging stone where her skull had been. Sable. Maeve scrambled downslope, pain searing her arm. Another shot rang, precise, cracking a twig near her shoulder. Sable was close now, inside lethal range, working the angles with the same calm Maeve had once praised on the range. The private channel hissed alive. 3 perfect shots, Maeve. That's the mentor I remember, but you hesitate between breaths. I hear it. Maeve pressed into a crevice, forcing her lungs to still. She keyed the mic. You're aiming at the wrong war, Sable. Darrow will burn you too. A pause, then a bitter laugh. Maybe. But my contract says I finish you. Snow swirled as the smoke mingled with avalanche dust, turning the ridge into a shifting veil. Maeve closed her eyes, tuned her ears. The ridge array picked up the faintest echo, the crunch of a boot, the ping of metal on rock. She adjusted, set her reticle on a shimmer through fog, and froze. Her arm shook. The ghost of Syria clawed at her. Another young face, another mistake waiting to happen. She forced breath into the metronome Layla had reminded her of. 4 beats in, 4 beats held, 4 out, 4 empty. Sable fired. The round kissed past Maeve's cheek, close enough to burn skin. Maeve didn't flinch. She let the mountain breathe for her, let the reticle still, and pressed the trigger. Her shot struck steel, not flesh, the mount of Sable's rifle snapping the optic off its rail. A cry of shock cut the radio. Silence followed. Maeve stayed on target, waiting. Finally a voice, quieter, trembling. "You could have killed me." "I don't waste bullets anymore," Maeve answered. Below, the SEALs broke into the avalanche channel, smoke and dust covering their retreat. Ramsey's voice carried, fierce and alive. "We're clear." "Repeat, we're out." Maeve slumped back against the stone, her arms screaming, lungs raw. The valley still thundered with chaos, but the men were moving, alive, because of 3 shots and a mountain that had chosen to sing again. She whispered into the silence, to herself, to the ghosts, to the boy she could never forget. Not this time. Maeve lay in the lee of the ridge, the smell of burnt cordite and dust choking her lungs. The valley below was chaos, mercenaries shouting in fractured lines, SEALs vanishing into the avalanche corridor, smoke curling like wounded ghosts. She kept her rifle angled across her chest, eyes fixed on the slope opposite. Sable Kirov was still out there, somewhere inside the fog. The radio hissed, and for a moment Maeve expected the taunting voice again. Instead, Captain Layla Shah cut through the static, urgent but calm. "Maeve, listen, you don't have to hold this alone. The Ridge Array isn't just your experiment, we've been expanding it." Maeve frowned, pressing the transmit. "Expanding how? You wired the sensors to sing, right?" "We connected them to others, weather stations, forestry towers, even civilian relays. A hidden net, waiting for the day the official ones were cut. We call it Ridgewatch. You're not the only ghost up here." As if to prove it, Maeve's receiver lit with new signals. Acoustic nodes from a ranger's hut 2 valleys over, a seismometer feed from a mining shaft, even a microphone hidden in a long-abandoned ski lift. The mountain's chorus grew richer, a layered song of echoes she hadn't known was there. Shah's voice softened, every overlooked worker who knew how to solder a wire or rig a sensor added to it. "You woke the net when you fired. They all see you now." Maeve stared at her scope, letting the feeds blend into one picture. The fog parted in pulses, revealing positions she couldn't have marked alone, enemy teams trying to flank, trucks repositioning, even the faint shuffle of a sniper crawling through shale. The Ridgewatch had her back. The private channel clicked open again. Sable's voice, strained now. "I saw that shot, Maeve. You took my optic instead of me. Why?" Maeve adjusted her rifle, following the new feeds until she caught the faint heat of Sable's position. She could end it now, clean, but she keyed the mic instead. "Because you're not my enemy, Darrow is, and you know it." Silence stretched, then a scrape of metal, soft, deliberate. Through her scope, Maeve saw Sable push her rifle aside, hands raised slightly, palms empty. Her voice came small but steady. "I wanted to prove I was better than you. Darrow made it easy to believe that mattered. But I don't want to die for his funnel." Maeve's breath loosened, the ache in her arm momentarily forgotten. She nodded, though Sable couldn't see it. "Then walk away. Live with the choice." Shah's voice returned, layered with relief. "Darrow's grid is broken, his men in disarray. Ridgewatch has tagged every straggler. We'll clean up. Maeve, you've given them the exit." Below, the SEALs' voices echoed, faint but alive, rallying, carrying their wounded out of the valley. Their comms, once frantic, now rang with something fiercer, gratitude. Maeve caught Ramsey's voice through the static, sharp with awe. "To whoever's on that ridge, you're the reason we walk. Angel of the mountain we'll never forget." Maeve closed her eyes, the name settling heavier than her rifle. She wasn't alone, not anymore. The valley smoldered for hours after the last shots faded. Black smoke drifted from overturned trucks, the avalanche scar still steaming where snow had ground stone to powder. Maeve stayed prone on her ledge until her breathing evened, until her wounded arm stopped shaking. Below, Darrow's mercenaries scattered in broken groups, their trap undone. Somewhere in that chaos, the colonel himself was dragged into custody by Alpine patrols, alerted through Ridgewatch's hidden net. His shouting carried on a frequency no one cared to hear. By dusk, the seals were clear. Their comms, once strangled, began to push through as Ridgewatch nodes rebalanced the spectrum. Maeve caught Ramsey's voice one last time. All teams Exfil safe. Lost some, saved more. To the shooter on the mountain, you gave us the crack in the wall. We owe you. Maeve lowered the rifle, the weight of it settling deeper than her bones. She disassembled it piece by piece, sliding each part back into the oil-dark cloth. She didn't want medals or names. The mountain had taken her shot, and that was enough. At Alpine base the next morning, Layla Shah intercepted her on the cable road. Maeve still wore her parka streaked with soot, goggles hanging askew. Shah handed her a plain folder. Inside were data sheets, maps, fragments of intercepted chatter. At the bottom, one phrase scrawled in blue ink: Ridgewatch. Activated. Maeve raised an eyebrow. Shah smiled faintly. You thought you were the only one who refused to stay small. Ridgewatch has been waiting. You just proved it works. Maeve glanced at the mast on her mountain, still humming. I didn't plan on proving anything. Heroes never do, Shah replied. But there's a network now. Cooks, clerks, weather techs, all overlooked. They've built their own ears into the earth. You're not alone anymore. Maeve closed the folder. The word alone caught in her chest, heavy and foreign. For years, solitude had been her refuge. Now it felt like an option she no longer owned. That evening, in a quiet corner of the base, Ramsey found her. His arm was bandaged, dirt still ground into his face. He didn't salute, he just looked at her, steady. We called you Angel of the Mountain. Men needed a name, hope needs a shape. Maeve shook her head. I'm no angel. Doesn't matter what you think, Ramsey said. What matters is 36 men walked out of hell and lived to tell it. That story's yours now, whether you want it or not. He left her with that truth, heavier than any medal. Days later, when the official report was filed, Maeve's name never appeared. The record spoke of terrain disruption, unexpected environmental shifts, and external interference neutralized. Darrow's trial would vanish into sealed transcripts. The SEALs would return to duty. The mountain would hold its silence, but on the ridgeline above the bowl, the men had left something behind. A scrap of wood hammered into frozen earth, a thermos dented and scorched, lashed to its top. Next to it, a cracked bipod leg blackened by powder burns, spray-painted on the rock below in quick, uneven letters, This is how we live. Maeve stood before it one dawn, the sun breaking across snowfields. She touched the thermos, her hands steady despite the scar. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a breath that wasn't rationed. Behind her, Shah approached quietly. Ridgewatch wants you on the grid. Train others, build more nodes. Next time the alarms are cut, there'll be more than one rifle on the mountain. Maeve looked out across the ranges, peaks layered into infinity. A storm gathered in the west, the kind that could blind a valley in minutes. She nodded once. Then we'd better be ready. The wind answered in its hollow tongue, tugging at her hood, humming against the mast. It carried no promise, only truth. Maeve slung her pack, the cloth-wrapped rifle inside, and stepped back into the silence she had chosen to break. Somewhere below, men remembered her as an angel. She thought of herself as a witness. But when the next shadow fell across the mountains, the world would learn what Ridgewatch already knew. Sometimes it takes a simple woman, breathing with the wind, to turn death sentences into exits. 36 SEALs walked out alive because one woman on a mountain refused to stay silent. The world saw a weather tech with a toolbox. The truth? A sniper the enemy thought they'd erased, back in the fight when it mattered most. And now I want to throw this question to you. If you were Maeve Archer, hearing "This is how we die" through static, would you have stayed hidden or pulled the trigger? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm reading every single one. If this story gave you chills, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell for a simple woman, because these are the stories history books leave out, but the ones you'll never forget. And trust me, the next one, it's even crazier.